At $549, this new EcoFlow 220 watt bifacial solar panel provides amazing results even in the shade, which we'll test in a minute, but it does have a couple cons as far as when setup goes, and that really starts right here with the case. Now, after purchasing this product, the setup should be simple, or so you would think, but the problem really begins with after getting this out of the case. You have to undo the case and then get the solar panel out, which is somewhat floppy and rigid at the same time. You can't really set it up at a proper angle on its own, and you can't really use it without the case because this acts as a stand for the solar panel. And after opening it up, you'll put it onto the case, and then you'll take a couple clips that they provide for the bottom and a couple more clips that they provide on the top, adjust it appropriately, and then after you kind of get this set up, which does take maybe a couple minutes, it'll be a little bit flimsy and kind of hokey looking, kind of like this. Now, the setup of this panel I hope is something they improve on, because one thing I definitely don't like is having to utilize the case as the actual stand, because it sits in the dirt and it's going to prematurely wear it out, not to mention just make it look ugly. And this is what it should look like after it's properly deployed and setting it up a couple times, and it does work pretty well, but I don't like the fact that the case is on the ground. But we'll take a little bit more look into this bifacial panel, and of course there are other ways to mount this, because they do give you these finish washers so you can mount this or even hang it from items if you want, so there are a couple of options there. So I went and opened this up in front of the sun, kind of a point and shoot. I didn't try for any optimal angles, and we'll kind of see what we're starting off with as far as input wattage, and then we'll try for some optimal angles to see what kind of increase we can get. So we're about 168 watts on the Delta 2 power station, and as we look at our meter here, sorry about the glare, about 173-74 watts here at the meter and 10.5 amps and a little bit over 16.5 volts. But now we'll try to get an optimal angle on this thing to see if we can get more wattage out of it. So we're going to use this little light finder here. It's basically just a light meter. You point and shoot and try to get the highest number you can. It's basically just showing how many watts per meter squared, but we're going to try to get around 1150 or so. I'll try to get the panel as high as I can, but because this isn't a real rigid panel, I'm not going to be able to get every single one exact, so we'll try to get around 1150. Okay, so now as we take a look, you can see it's a little bit higher. We gained about 100, and this one's about 1145, and you can see where the peak kind of is as I rock this back and forth, but this will be close enough because 10 to 20 isn't going to really change that much. And here is another quick look at the panel. You can kind of see how it's not exactly straight, it kind of bows a little bit, but we'll see what kind of gains we got with getting more of a premium angle on it now and kind of adjusting the case. So we'll take a look at the meter now. So now you can see we're about 182, 183 watts, and we gained a good half of an amp, maybe 0.6, and also a little bit more voltage. But what happens when we add a little bit of reflection to the backside? So I'm going to use these solar panels, and if you watch the case as it gets a little bit brighter right here, and then it'll get darker, and then brighter again on the back side of the panel. So I'll use these to reflect the light, and we'll see what kind of gain we get. Okay, so both of those solar panels are aimed at the back side of the bifacial EcoFlow panel, and we'll see if we gain anything. And I will move the EcoFlow here in just a minute, but I can't move the case because obviously that's part of the stand. So now if you take a look, we've gained a good, maybe 1.5 watts, maybe 2, depending on how it goes back and forth as it hovers around 184, 185 watts. I'm going to go ahead and remove the EcoFlow Delta because it's in the way. And now that we got that out of the way, we'll see if it provides any extra gain. And as we take a look, kind of still looks the same at about 184, 185. Now, how about a cheaper option? These are both Harbor Freight 100 watt solar panels. Now, I moved both of these and got them set up at kind of a peak angle because the shade was starting to come in over there from the far side. So we'll see what this looks like with just putting them both at the sun, getting a premium angle, and see what kind of wattage these provide. So as we take a look at our Delta 2, we're at about 176 watts from both of those panels over there. And I was going to show you the numbers, but it looks like my light meter finally died, but I wanted to show you that it was pretty much equal to the EcoFlow panel. But I've rebuilt this thing like, I don't know, 10 or 20 times, and it's about 15 years old, and it's a shame because it's worked pretty good. But we'll take a look at this meter and kind of take a look. So you can see about 172 here, and what was that, 176 at the power station. So look at our amperage though, obviously a lot lower because this is what they're rated at in series, and our voltage is doubled up because they do about 16 to 17 each. So overall, I mean, it just kind of shows you the difference in price. But one thing that's nice about this panel is its ability to provide power in the shade. So that whole panel over there is shaded out, right? So normally in a series setup, this would pretty much knock our whole system down to zero, but we're still getting 105 watts and 6.5 amps Now look at that, 106 watts right into the delta. And I'll show you what this looks like as a whole solar panel gets shaded, because it's actually pretty cool. Now this one, with that amount of shade right there being in series, this thing is probably putting out like 2 watts or maybe nothing. But because this thing is wired in a different configuration, it's series paralleled inside this panel all the way through it. So even when you get shading on 2 panels like this, it's still putting out power from those 2 panels over there. But when we get some shade over there, it'll be interesting to see if any power comes out. Okay, so I waited until 2 panels were completely shaded, and this one's got, what, 30% shade on it? So we'll check the output now and see what this looks like, because each one of these panels puts out about 55 watts. So 55, 55, all the way up to 220. So we'll see how much we're getting with one full panel and another one partially shaded. All right, as we look at the power coming in, you can see, well, 52, 53 watts almost. And as we check the delta 2, still getting in 52 watts there. So this is pretty cool, because most of the time these panels, when they get shaded like this, they will be pretty much down to 0 or putting out minimal, and sometimes not even enough to turn on the power station. Okay, so as we set this up for a little bit more shade, I'm going to wait until this panel is pretty much covered, and then there's shade on the other one. Okay, now as you can see, that one's pretty much fully shaded, and a little bit of shade on the last panel, so we should be down to 0. But look at this, still getting 15 watts, and I assumed we'd have a few volts, but even into the Delta power station, we're still getting 16, so this is pretty cool. I'm going to let it get some more shade on it, and then we'll see where it finally drops off of power. I'm assuming probably when at least half of that panel is covered up is when we should see 0 watts and maybe just a couple volts. Okay, so no more watts into the Delta 2, but I want you to look at the meter here, as it's actually still putting out just a little bit of power, and then I'll show you the panel because there is like no sun on it. But look at this, if you had a smaller power station that didn't need as high as a voltage to kick on the power station, it would actually provide some more watts. And look at that, there was like no sun on this thing hardly at all, which is pretty amazing to be able to still get just a couple watts out of it and enough volts to put on maybe a small power station if you had one, or a charging brick and more. So this is actually pretty impressive and well done as far as the EcoFlow bifacial panel goes. But let me know what you think about this solar panel down below in the comments, and check out these other solar comparisons right here.